Good evening, welcome. I'm John. I'm the event director at Literati Bookstore in downtown Ann Arbor, Michigan. We're so pleased to welcome Nick McDonald to our At Home with Literati series in support of the Council of Animals and in conversation this evening with Kathleen Shine. Just a quick webinar overview for our attendees. The chat is closed this evening, but you can keep the chat window open as I will be dropping links to purchase the Council of Animals from Literati throughout the event. You can use the Q&A feature on your toolbar to submit questions at any time, and I will ask a selection at the conclusion of the conversation. And live transcription is available to you on your toolbar. If you're watching us later as well on YouTube, you can find links to purchase books from Literati right below in the description. As a reminder, you can shop for more books at literatibookstore.com to have shipped to your home anywhere in the United States. And of course, if you live in Southeast Michigan or the Ann Arbor area, our doors are open to the public for in-store shopping. Most of all, we'd just like to thank you for your attendance this evening or this morning or this afternoon, depending on where and when in the world you may be joining us. And now I'll introduce tonight's author and our moderator. Nick McDonald studied literature at Harvard and international relations at St. Anthony's College, Oxford. His fiction has been published in 22 languages and appeared on bestseller lists around the world. As a reporter for the London Review of Books, Time, NewYorker.com, and Harper's, Nick has embedded with the United States Army and Marines, the Afghan Special Forces, the African Union Mission to Darfur, and the Iraqi Special Forces. Nick's last book, The Bodies in Person, an account of civilian casualties in American wars, was published in 2018. Nick is co-founder of the Zomia Center for the Study of Non-State Spaces, which supports scholarly and humanitarian projects around the world. And speaking with him this evening, Kathleen Shine is the author of the internationally best-selling novels The Love Letter, which was made into a movie starring Kate Capshaw, and Rameau's Niece, which was also made into a movie starring Parker Posey. Her most recent is the acclaimed novel The Grammarians. In addition to novels, she has written articles for The New Yorker, the New York Review of Books, New York Times Sunday Magazine, and the New York Times Book Review, among other publications. She grew up in Westport, Connecticut, and lives in Venice, California. Please join me in welcoming Nick McDonald and Kathleen Shine into your living rooms.
Well, I just want to say thank you to you, John, and to everybody out there. And way out there is Nick. So, Nick, can you tell us where you are?
For sure, yeah. First of all, likewise, thank you, John, for having me, and thanks, Kathleen, for doing this talk with me. I'm in Kabul, Afghanistan at the moment, which does feel a long way from Ann Arbor.
Yeah, a long way from Venice, and a long way from home, I assume, for you. Would you like to start by reading, or would you like to talk a little bit first and then read? What suits your Kabul?
I'm happy to read the beginning.
Great.
Read the first chapter, if that makes sense to you, and then we can go from there. How about that?
And I'm just going to hold up the book because it has this wonderful cover, and it has wonderful illustrations, which really, that was a surprise and a treat. So here it is.
Yeah, Stephen Tabot did those things. They're totally fantastic. And some of those characters appear right here. So I will get into it.
Okay.
All right, this is chapter 1. The animals decided to vote. They chose a location more convenient to some than others. It was a vast super yacht, grounded upon a cliff high above the sea. A bulldog arrived first. He was grizzled, mostly gray, and arthritic. His undershot jaw, however, retained much of its fierce, stubborn strength. He was a determined-looking sort of dog. Limping into the shade of a smashed helicopter, fallen from its place on the yacht's deck, he sniffed the wind for creatures. He smelled none and so lay down, snout upon paws, to wait. Anticipating the difficulty of the journey, he had left his pack before dawn and was, in fact, early. Next came a horse, trotting, idiotically, thought the dog, in zigzags toward the yacht. His almond coat was glossy, and his mane was streaked blonde from sunshine. A brilliant white stripe ran down his muzzle. He slowed to a panting rest. Catching his breath, he nosed for something to eat in the weeds beside the dog. "Good afternoon," said the dog. "Where are the sugar cubes?" "Sugar cubes? Sometimes they have sugar cubes. None of them are here." The horse appeared to think about this. "That's the point," added the dog. "Carrots?" Dog and horse regarded each other for a long moment. "No carrots either, you bloody fool," added the dog internally. The horse continued nosing in the weeds. "The cat told me to tell you she'll be late," he said, through a mouthful of dandelions. Before the dog had time to complain about this, the horse snapped his head up in alarm and looked down the promontory. Though it had been agreed no animal should harm another for the duration of the meeting, he could not banish instinct. He smelled the bear before he saw her. The dog, too. Together, they watched her pad along, ropey muscles rolling beneath her fur. "I thought it would be a snow bear," whispered the horse. "Polar bear," corrected the dog. This bear was a grizzly, and though certainly fearsome from afar, she was not, really, a very strong or well-fed bear. She looked rather scruffy, in fact, harried. "Good afternoon," said the dog, as the bear joined them in the shade. "Have the others arrived?" asked the bear. "Not yet," said the dog. "The cat told me to tell you she'll be late," repeated the horse. "No surprises there, eh?" said the dog, hoping to befriend the bear. But the bear only grunted. Perhaps it would be a long wait. She pawed her way into the broken helicopter's cockpit. Rummaging about, she was pleased to discover a spiral-bound flight manual. She hooked it with a claw and carried it out to the grass. The bear looked at helicopter diagrams, the horse ate, and soon the dog dozed off. He hadn't been asleep long when a striped cat arrived. Purring, she rubbed along the horse's great hooves, then nodded respectfully at the bear, and found herself a perch in the crashed helicopter upon one of its soft, upholstered seats. The cat had just begun grooming a leg when, with a sharp caw, a crow announced himself. He descended in spirals and landed on one of the propeller blades. "Bird blessings on you," said the crow, by way of greeting. And then, almost as soon as the crow had landed, the ringing of a bell cut the seaside air. As one, the animals looked up to the source of the sound. It was a yellow-eyed baboon, peering at them from a hatch in the yacht's deck high above. In one pink hand, this baboon held a brass bell, which he shook again with great vigor before stowing it in a small bag he wore over his shoulder. "Order," shouted the baboon. "We'll begin, for victory." The bear closed the flight manual, and the horse stopped chewing dandelions. This baboon seemed very excited. He clambered down the deck and landed neatly beside the dog. I'm up," insisted the dog, though he'd been fast asleep. "But, baboon," said the bear, "we can't begin. We're not all here." "Yes, the cats are late as usual," added the dog, very disrespectful. "This dog must still be sleeping," said the cat in the cockpit, and the horse whinnied with laughter. A look of great frustration darkened the dog's square face. "I was just thinking." "We are all here," said the baboon. "Bird blessings," interrupted the crow, "on all creatures." "Bird gods are important, very important," agreed the baboon, before turning to the bear. "All of us are here. Anyone who is not here is not us. That's we. So we can begin." "But if the others aren't here," said the bear slowly, focusing on one bit of the problem, "how will they decide how to vote?" "They vote as we tell them," said the baboon. "Animals like that." The bear frowned. "Still," she said, "I think it is better not to rush." "Horse," said the baboon, ignoring the bear. "I looked everywhere. I worked very hard, and found this for you." And the baboon produced from his shoulder bag a yellow box. He ripped off its top with his teeth and set it down for the horse. The box, the animal saw, was full of brown sugar. In a blink, the horse snuffled it all up. He even began chewing on the box. "Where did you get that?" asked the dog. "Only I can get it for you," said the baboon. "Only I." "I could get it too," said the crow. "Praise be to the egg." "Dog," said the bear, who did not want to be distracted from the issue at paw, "don't you agree? Better not to rush our vote." The dog, puffing out his chest, was pleased to be consulted. He decided he would say something wise about how, in the wars, it was always better not to rush. But before he had managed to say anything, the baboon was talking again. "Not rush," exclaimed the baboon, "but we have to rush for safety, for our victory. Right, dog? We must have order." The dog, now confused, hesitated. "I disagree," purred the cat. "Fully agreed," said the dog. He disagreed with cats on principle, though which principle it was, he could not precisely say. "That settles it," said the baboon. "Crow, call us to order." "But," said the bear, "but," the crow called out in his powerful voice, "Animal Council in order." The dog saluted. The cat sighed and shook her head. "All animals," the crow continued, "make their mark. In their respective ways, each animal marked territory. The bear scratched her back against the yacht. The dog peed on it. The cat rubbed her cheeks against the helicopter seat. The horse dropped a dung pile. The baboon howled and slapped the ground. The crow sang out his song, then pronounced, "Caw. The question is set with the blessing of the bird gods by previous animal council. The animal kingdoms listen and agree in the light of the egg. Caw." "Takes a minute to get going, doesn't he?" muttered the dog to the bear. "And with nest blessings we pray for wisdom in our vote, whereby the calamity destroyed the ecosystems of many eggs and animals, whereby humans caused the calamity." Here the baboon hissed and bared his teeth. The crow continued, "And whereby only a few humans survived the calamity. Resolved, the animal kingdom, represented by the ambassadors here marking their territory, shall, to protect against further calamity, eat all the humans. Animals, how do you vote? Yea or nay?" "I can't believe it has come to this," whispered the bear to the cat. "It's not over," whispered back the cat. "Caw," called the crow. "It has been agreed by rabbit procedure that the dog shall speak and cast his vote first. I yield to the dog. Caw." And that's the end of chapter 1.
Okay. We're in a precarious position here. I mean, the book, would you call this a fable or an adventure story or a mystery, or how would you characterize it? Just it's a novel, but how would you characterize it beyond that?
When people ask me about it, what I've been saying is that it is a book about talking animals.
About
talking animals.
Yes.
Just the simplest explanation of it. But I hope that it's both of those things. I hope that it's a fable and that it's an adventure story. Both good ways to characterize it.
Yeah, I thought of that, and one of the things I found, which I think you can see already just in the first chapter, is it's a novel with a lot of complexity, moral and ethical complexity. Nobody is 100% right or 100% wrong, although people lean way one way and animals, creatures lean one way or the other. but it's told, all of this complexity is told in this kind of pared down, simple style. And for me, I found that very powerful because it kind of emphasized the complexity of the issues of the calamity and of the apocalypse and of the evolution, the end of the earth as we know it because of climate change, the precarious position we're in as a species and as are all other species, and all of that, which is not a simple thing, told in such a simple way, seemed to me to really present us with the horror of it and the challenge of it, but at the same time give us a sense of the complexity of it. And I think also using the way that you used, one of the things I liked very much was the way you use the point of view of the animals. They're not just the animals. They're each animal has a very distinct personality. And one of the things I liked a lot was when one animal is sort of side-eyeing the other animal and saying, the way that horse is trotting is just ridiculous. It's just zigzagging, or so they're sort of commenting on each other, and it gave it that's I think what gave it the kind of complexity also of a novel, the literary complexity. And so I'm just wondering how you got here. Because, and maybe you can tell us a little bit about yourself, because you've written different kinds of books over time, and quite a few of them for someone as young as you. And so I'm just wondering how you ended up at this fable called The Council of the Animals.
Well, thank you for that kind analysis of this book. I agree. I think that the apocalypse is very complex, but also very simple at the same time.
Right.
I hope it doesn't come quite as quickly as it might appear to be coming. As for how I ended up here, the last book I wrote was about civilian casualties in Iraq and Afghanistan, right, where I am now, and it was, though at times could be hopeful because of the people who I was reporting on and with, it was a kind of relentlessly grim story. And when I finished with it, I was thinking quite a bit about just what was redeemable in our species. And it seemed to me sometimes that there was not very much. And as I kept thinking about that problem, which is kind of a simplification of a lot of complex problems, I had this idea for how one might think about that if one were trying to reduce it down to say how you would talk about it to an adolescent or a kid. Mm-hmm. And so at the time I was trying to learn how to speak Spanish. I am still trying to learn to speak Spanish, not very well, but my exercises involved writing simple sentences about animals, el gato, el perro. And I found that I really liked doing that, writing these kind of silly, very simple grammatical exercises. And one day I started doing it in English about this question. Are humans even worth saving at all? And it just was so much fun to write, frankly, and a way to think about this enormous question. And I myself am on team human in the end. And so the book sort of proceeded from there. And that was how it started.
That's interesting. I love the way books come and find you, rather than just saying, oh, I'm going to write this fable about, and I'm going to use animals because that's a way of looking at people from a different vantage point. But it doesn't really happen like that. The book kind of comes, and the book came and found you. And so here's another question.
Well, let me ask you this, Bo, since we're here and we're having a conversation, is that how it works for you too? Do you,
does
Do you know where you're going when you start the book, or does it?
No, never. I mean, and no, and I mean, for me, it's difficult sometimes because I don't know until I'm finished, and then I have no idea what the book is about, and then I have to go back and read it, and yeah, it finds me, but it takes me a while to, recognize that it has, and I think it makes it more fun. It's much more boring if you have an outline and you go step by step and you fill in the blanks. Then I've tried to do that and I get bored. I would imagine you would too, because this book has a feeling of discovery in it, for the animals, but I think, and also for the reader. But just to talk about the animals just for a second, how did you, and this is a similar question because this is about characters and how did you come up with these characters? Well, how did you choose these animals, these particular animals, and how did you realize what their personalities and what their role in the story would be?
Well, there are kind of two elements to that, how that happened. And the first is connected to writing the whole book. And excuse me, it was this sense of discovery as the story was going along and who the characters were. But I was also thinking, as I was thinking about who these different animals would be, about why exactly I was writing the book. And I always go back to this "Why I Write" essay that George Orwell wrote. And he said that everyone who's a writer writes for only one of four reasons, or only four reasons. And they are political purpose, for the historical record, aesthetic satisfaction, and egomania. And in any writer over the course of a lifetime, one can see how these four impulses ebb and flow. And this book was a lot, I mean, there's always some egomania, but this book was particularly a lot of aesthetic satisfaction because it was just so much fun to write. And then there was some political purpose too. And that was part of what was up with these animals. As I was trying to think about the people who I knew and the people who I saw when I read the news and how they might fit into, say, a bear or a crow or sort of what their animal form would be. And so the animals, I chose the animals because they resembled some of the people I was reading about or listening to, or not that they were ripped straight from the news, but sort of people I had met in my own reporting and life too.
Mm-hmm. And not, I assume not a physical, maybe a physical resemblance as well. I don't know, but,
yeah.
But they definitely have serious human, they have human characteristics. And one of the things that I found interesting was that, so you have the dog who's domesticated, as one would expect. And I mean, and there's a very, very funny passage where he is telling himself, he's giving himself commands. We have a puppy who we're trying to train, and she is not like this dog. She doesn't listen to any commands, but he gives them himself. He's very well trained. He tells himself to sit, and he shows, I'm in charge of myself. But what he's really done is absorb the desires of his former masters. But at the same time, he is in charge of himself, except when someone throws a stick and then he can't control himself, he has to fetch. The horse is, the horse has seen humans both at their best and their worst, and as has the dog. The dog has been to war. The horse has seen cruelty and the sort of preposterous nature of games using horses that hurt them, and has seen humans be cruel to humans. And the bear, who is in some ways, I think, the kind of most, for me, I guess, because at one point the bear decides to just existentially check out. The bear gets beaten down by the horror of everything, which I identified with. But the bear, before coming to this existential despair, says, look, humans have done good things for us. They've tried to save us. They've, but at the same time, the bear was in the movies and was exploited as an actor. And the cat is, I mean, to some extent, the cat and the orangutan. Well, the orangutan is just the sort of this power hungry wild man, I think you'd say, and is several times people have said you're closest to humans, and the crow, is this religious fanatic, and then the cat is just kind of this, this cat. I mean, it really is a cat. I mean, one of the things I liked, and then I'll let you talk about them instead of me talking about them, was there were certain little puns buried here and there, which I enjoyed. Whether they were, on purpose by you or not, I don't know. But the cat really is almost killed by curiosity, and the bear really can't bear it anymore. And those kind of things, really resonated with me. I like that. But what I found interesting was it's not just the domesticated animals who are so, who portray characteristics of human beings. They all do, for good or for better or for worse. And but my real question is, why a bear? Why a duck? No, why a bear? Why a dog? Why a cat? How did these creatures come up? These are, by the way, very characteristic of cartoons, with animals, which I've always loved, and with animals who talk, and they're not the orangutan, I guess. There's Magilla gorilla, but not an orangutan. But I'm just curious if, and that's part of my growing up, and my subconscious is there, all those cartoons. And so I'm just wondering why those particular animals, and did you feel that you needed to have them reflect their own, the behavior of those animals in the wild, or, did you feel that they were so much part of this fable that they actually could be the characters that you needed and wanted them to be?
Well, on the one hand, I was tempted by many different kinds of animals. These animals are in some ways the most famous, most frequently used animals in day-to-day human life as it is lived, for example, in New York City, where I am from. And I had a great conversation the other day with Carl Safina, who's an ecologist, and he was telling me about the way that scarlet macaws and sperm whales talk to each other. And these animals have these enormously powerful sentient intelligences. Maybe more equal to our own, or certainly, they sound equal to our own, they just sound very different, but they are really different. So these animals certainly, by no stretch of the imagination, encounter the phenomena of the world the way that we do. And I don't think this makes them any less valuable than we are on this planet. But that said, this was not a book in which I was going to try to embody whale consciousness, maybe for one of the sequels, maybe for another book. And there's totally fascinating scientific work done on that sort of stuff. In this, I wanted to sit the book in a tradition of animal fables, and those fables that go all the way back to the beginning of, I think, drawing animals on the side of a cave wall, take the animals that people are familiar with and then imbue in them human characteristics. And I don't think this necessarily does down the animals or puts humans on top of the animals. I think it's about understanding that they and us are all kind of in the same boat, and that we are rocking that boat, particularly is what this book was about.
Yeah, there's discussion about, some of the animals are saying, hey, the human beings are animals too. And so, yes, but I also think, and it's one of the things I liked, is that these animals have, in addition to their life in the wild, as you say, there's a long literary tradition, and tradition in film, and tradition in television, there's a long cultural tradition of these animals in fairy tales and folk tales, having these kinds of powers, being able to talk and having certain personalities. And you drew on all of that, I think, in interesting ways. And
thanks about the puns, by the way. I loved doing those. I mean, I hope there's some in there that are unintentional. I was trying to put as many puns in there as I possibly could.
Yeah, there was, and there were literary references, and Shakespeare, and probably things that I didn't pick up as well. But that, and also there was a lot of, I love the discussion of let's see, where did I put it? Anyway,
the bear. I also am particularly fond of the bear. She is existentially afflicted, as you say, and she's a Hollywood bear. And I have worked in Hollywood a little bit myself, and there feels the making up of worlds is an existentially fraught problem for bears and humans alike. And that's why the bear is the one who gets to quote Shakespeare and do the things that bears
and what is real like and what matters, and we're all going to die, and so why bother, and it's time for me to hibernate now. I loved that, and I also loved the insect world, and I was very happy that you included them, not just as irritants, which as a fly flies around me they can be, but as also very important creatures with long histories and who will outlast us.
The insects are the future, I think. And I have been talking with a friend of mine for some time about how eventually we're probably going to have to be eating insects because of our poor stewardship. They're such a great source of protein, and that they're going to be insect energy bars and all kinds of insect cuisine. But here, I think the insect's collective action instinct is what is most important about them.
Yes, there was wonderful sort of political theory thrown in here and there, and collective action of the insects was one of the things that I appreciated.
So what's your dog's name, your puppy's name?
Ruthie.
Ruth.
Yeah.
And how is that going? What's the problem with her? It sounds like it's going okay.
She's a sweet and lovely dog, and she's a pandemic dog. I mean, we got her right before the pandemic, and so it's like Velcro. We're together at all times, and she's completely charmed us, and we haven't really trained her very well. So she's the boss, and we do what she says, and she's very. There's a lot of communication. One of the things in the book that was wonderful was, yes, it's about language and all the animals can speak to each other and the humans don't understand it, but it's about a lot of different kinds of communication, which I thought was, which is essential. And it's, and the humans are not listening. And then sometimes the animals behaving like humans don't really listen to each other. So this idea of communication, as was also there. I mean, there's a lot of serious stuff, as well as wit, and also just playful things that that make you laugh and turn the page.
It really is a miracle the way that such as we do, animals manage to coexist. I mean, in Afghanistan, this is not the best example of coexistence, peaceful coexistence, certainly at the moment. But on the animal level, in the house that I'm staying in, there's a dog and quite a few ducks, and they coexist. We coexist, and the dog here is named the dog is named Mushu, and the dog is I'm sort of shocked the dog hasn't killed the ducks, actually, because the dog has managed to catch a cat here and did do quite gruesome work on the cat, and sort of does quite a bit of running and barking. Can actually open the doors in the house. It's that kind of a dog.
Yeah. Oh God, no, Ruthie hasn't learned that yet. And I hope she doesn't, but she's little. So that's the only thing that saves her from being a complete menace. I guess, how do you feel that your trajectory, your arc as a writer has somehow brought you here? I mean, you wrote a novel when you were 17, which, even though I'm 50 years older than that, I still feel a little like, what? Why didn't I do that? It's so remarkable. I mean, I could barely hold a pencil when I was 17. And I believe that was about New York City and private schools, something I know about because I raised my kids there in private schools, and drugs and all of that. And then a lot of reporting and very, very serious and important stuff about death and the military and war. And then you have this very charming, dark, but also at the same time charming fable. How does it feel like that this is where you were going, or did this just sort of pop up like a flower from 10 gardens ago that you weren't expecting?
That is a lovely way of thinking about it. I don't have much of a green thumb. 10 gardens ago, the trajectory, I think, started to change a little bit when I was doing the last book before this, because I tried to start thinking more critically about what it was that I was doing. And I think that it took me certainly a couple of books to start thinking that way and to think critically about that. And the last book, I was after something very specific historically and politically, and it felt like that kind of work. But I love writing also for the sake of writing. And I think that it's enormously valuable just on its own terms. And I do think that the best writing is done when one loves what one is writing. And so the trajectory, I think it's not, in retrospect, it's not surprising that this is where I've ended up. And I also got a lot of good advice from people who told me something along the lines of, you should lighten up a little bit. And I think they were right.
That's funny. No one's ever said that to me about my books. That's interesting. I mean, I used to, for the last few years, felt a tremendous, terrible writer's block, which I'd never had in my life, because unlike many people, I like writing. I enjoy it. I mean, I procrastinate and don't do it. And then when I'm doing it, it's the best thing in the world. And I'd never had trouble really just sitting down to do it. But all the things that were happening in the last few years, I was just completely distracted and very, very busy worrying uselessly, and very much like the bear going into hibernation. And then I remembered this line from a writer I love very much named Barbara Pym, who's an English writer who wrote these very deceptively simple books, domestic manners of comedies of manners, that are actually very dark and interesting and deep. And I just remember in a letter she wrote to someone, she had written a book, and she said, well, I don't know how good it is, but I'm sure it will give comfort to someone somewhere. And I thought, that's also something viable and something you can do, and it made me feel a little bit better. And I think this book both has it's a warning to all of us, but there's also a level of comfort in it that one gets from reading. And that, I mean, I don't want to give away anything, but there is a section where someone is reading a book and you just feel the comfort that book is giving that creature. And so I think one of the good things about this is that it does have that and aspires to that and embraces that at the same time that it's saying, hello, everyone, this is the end of the line for us. And that's a difficult tightrope. So were you were you aware of that going back and forth, or was that, I mean, it doesn't feel like going back and forth. It feels quite part of the whole, but.
There was a little bit of, I was not sure quite how it was going to end. I thought this could end in a big chow down in which the animals just chow down on all
the ending is
so it took a little while to figure that out, but I think that idea of books as comfort is a real thing and certainly informed this. And the tradition you were talking about earlier of books of talking animals is so deep. The Redwall books, for example, I don't know if you know those, but Brian Jacques wrote 25 of these things.
Yeah.
And when I was a little boy and an adolescent, these things were really important to me, and really informed the way that I think look in the world at the world in ways that I don't even fully understand. And then Watership Down, and there's a whole tradition of these things. And one thing that has been constant throughout everything I've ever written has been trying to write books that I really would like to read myself, or that resembled books that I loved when I was younger. And that was part of what this was about too.
Were you working on this during the pandemic? Well, during the pandemic, during the lockdown in the United States, were you working on this? Did that inform this in any way?
I actually started it before the pandemic began, and finished it during the pandemic, but it did inform, certainly. But it didn't inspire, but it did inform a little bit later on.
Yeah. It has I had a feeling it started, well, first of all, just because of the way publishing works, I figured it probably started earlier, but it seems very much on point for where we are, and for this self-destructive nature that we humans seem to have. Now, did you grow up with pets?
We had a cat named Joe. It turns out, am allergic to cats, but we did not know this until after Joe had joined the family. And so Joe and I lived a kind of uneasy coexistence for a while. And Joe eventually became kind of an outdoor cat, where I think that he was happier in the end. I definitely was happier. But after that, I didn't have any pets.
Okay. Well, now that explains some of the character of the cat that we see.
So it's difficult to trust cats for me, but
right.
People have this dog person, cat person thing. I want to reject the premise. You can be both a dog and a cat person, but
yes, you can, and a bear person.
Cat, sure, yeah.
And a crow person. I'm a big crow fan. They're very interesting. But
yeah, the crows get a bit of a bad rap in this book because they are such beautiful and remarkable creatures. But this particular crow is kind of like a bird brain, you might say. And he,
yeah. So now the horse. How did you end up with the horse being just this herd beast who just doesn't really pay much attention to what's going on? Was that inspired by any horses that you know, or just by people that you know?
No, there wasn't a particular horse. I went on vacation once to Baja, Mexico, and I stayed with a friend of mine who teaches people how to ride horses there. And I think there was a particular horse there that I thought about, but I can't even remember that poor horse's name. And that poor horse is so slandered and libeled by this book that
the horse is a horse.
Yeah, that's just true.
And it has the horse. They all have their moments. Even the scorpion has a moment. So I don't think any of the animals really have to. We don't have to worry about
Good, I'm glad.
About their reputations. Maybe the crows. Okay, I'll go there. The crows are like really but this, as you say, this crow was a religious fanatic. What are what are you going to do? They're not all the same. And that's one of the things that, you have to sort of think these are individual animals who come from a literary background, not the crow you see dragging the piece of pizza along the street, the crows we grew up with. Well, I was very taken with them. I also I love the aphorisms that appear here and there. Did you? I think I may have markings. Oh, here's the thing that I was trying to say before. There's a moment when you're talking about historians and history, and you start out talking about the sort of conflict that some people see between biology and history and the social sciences, and then you talk about biological and cultural influences, and then there's this wonderful passage about about a creature's vocal cords vibrating, creating sound waves, and that goes into sounds and physics, and then chemistry and neuroendocrinology and bioengineering. And that was another way that I thought that I found very interesting, where it sort of emphasized the unity of all of us and the way we function. And I was taken with that. And there were a number of things like that where there's some information in there that that gets dissected and thereby unified into life, what life is.
Thank you for noticing that particular passage. That passage was not cribbed, but comes from the work of a primatologist and neuroscientist whom I admire enormously, a guy named Robert Sapolsky, who's at Stanford. And he wrote a book called Behave that came out a couple of years ago. Mm-hmm. And in it, he makes the case, and I think this is right, that the disciplines as we have them can be very useful, but they also obscure the world.
Yeah.
Disciplines are tools. And in his work, which is explaining the best and worst of human behavior, he proposes to look at it in terms of time rather than discipline, which requires this vast learning and erudition, which he has as a scientist and a person who knows the humanities too. But he says, look at the first nanosecond before something happens. And this will have you in the fields of chemistry and physics and neuroendocrinology. And then you go another second out, and then you're thinking about a different kind of biology and a different kind of hormonal science that you'd be studying, or the science of hormones. You can see that I'm not a scientist as I'm trying to even explain this to you. But then to go another second out and to look at the stimuli that would have gone into the system that would have caused those things. And of course, then you can study all of the time and influences that go into those stimuli. And then further out, and then you're dealing with eventually the cultural exchanges that are causing someone to do something, and out and out and out and out until you are all the way millennia ago looking at evolutionary biology. Mm-hmm. And to have the respect for the complexity of cause and effect and to be willing to take that on, I think is a really astonishing and humbling way of looking at the world that is scientific, but also in the best sense, humanistic, I guess would be the word, because it forces us to confront the complexity of everything that happens. And I think that in looking at the world that way, it's hard not to have, no matter how gnarly the baboons are being, to have some sympathy for the baboons. I think book really informed this one.
That's really interesting, and I will now read that book. But I think this thread of complexity and unity and simplicity all being in some ways the same. I mean, in other words, the more complex something is, the more you realize it's shared by more people and more animals and more organisms and more beings, I think is something that I just kept coming across in the book and found very moving, and in some ways what I felt the book was about, other than the apocalypse is coming and everybody should be afraid as we are.
Yeah, no, I think that's it. And I think that the tension of the book and in work as it goes on, for me, is the question of a friend of mine here who worked for the United Nations and now has since left the country once said, don't let too much understanding lead to too much forgiveness. And so there is also this tension about understanding complexity, but being able or being willing to take stands about what is right and wrong politically. And that is something that is inside of this, I hope, and that I'm still trying to figure out.
Yeah, I mean, that's the question. That's the basic question of the book. And the answer is not obvious. And I think that's, I mean, I guess that's, it is a fable, but in that way, I think it's, beyond a fable because it doesn't say, and this is the answer. And this is, here we've reached moral clarity, because there is no moral clarity about some of this stuff. And yet these animals have to make a decision. And so do we in similar situations. Well, we don't have exactly similar situations as the Council of the Animals, and yet we do. So I thought that was, very much the texture of the book, the fabric of it was that tension between complexity and the simplicity of what's right and what's wrong, which is never quite as simple as we would hope. So and it has pictures.
And it has pictures. It has beautiful pictures.
So, yeah. I mean, what more can you ask? Anyway, I don't know if we're at time.
Yeah, we are at the top of the hour. I think that's a really great note to end on, to leave people with hopefully the desire to read the book and take on some of those complexities through their reading experience. And of course, there's a link to purchase The Council of Animals in the chat. And of course, if you're watching us later on YouTube, there's always links to purchase books from our bookstore right below me in the description. Nick McDonald, Kathleen Shine, thank you so much for joining us. In Nick's case, very early in the morning, this afternoon, in my case, this evening on At Home with Literati. I hope we can have you both in the bookstore in the not too distant future for these or your next title. But we hope you continue to be well. And to all of our viewers, thank you so much for joining us at Home with Literati as well. We look forward to seeing you at the next event. Have a great evening, everybody.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Take care.